I was going to make a modeling video today, and then I thought, nah, I'm not really feeling it because I'm probably going to be painting most of the day tomorrow. I was going to do an action figure video, like on a custom, but I had nothing to customize right now because most of my stuff is at a standstill until I can, matte spray. Mr. Super Clear, until I can matte spray my stuff. So, until it, is good enough for me to do that outside, I figured I would make a video similar in concept to my action figure history videos, like with the Halo figures and the Toy Biz figures and all that stuff. I figured I'd make a similar video to that, but not about history, more about a question that I feel like is really, really commonly asked, but everybody kind of has a different answer, which is, what is the best scale for an action figure? Now, an action figure can be defined in many ways. Personally, I like to think of an action figure as a figurine of something that can pose that, resembles that of a toy. So, meaning those like wooden drawing figures aren't action figures. By definition, I suppose they are, but I don't consider them to be. And I also don't consider Funko Pops to be action figures. They have articulation, but they're not a fully posable action figure. They're bobbleheads, they're collectibles, So, yeah, to answer it most simply, I don't really have a specific idea of what the best scale is. I think it really depends on a toy line. Now, I do believe that certain properties should have a certain scale, right? Like Star Wars, for example. I don't really believe that Star Wars toys should be 6 inches or 12 inches or 5 inches or whatever they've been over the years. I believe that Star Wars toys should consistently be 3 3/4 inches tall, because realistically, what is Star Wars without the X-Wing? What is Star Wars without the Millennium Falcon? Without the Death Star or a Star Destroyer? Now, the Death Star or Star Destroyer can't really be made for action figures unless if they were the size of, like, someone's house. But, the 6-inch scale doesn't really allow for an X-Wing to be made and sold. They did make a TIE Fighter for Black Series. Hasbro made a TIE Fighter. But that's kind of different because if you think of a TIE Fighter, it's like the two wings are like panels, and then you've got the cockpit and the figure. It's a big box, but it's not super unrealistic to make. Something like a Millennium Falcon, that would never be able to be made at a 6-inch scale and sold at a reasonable price. That would have to be like some mega HasLab that would be the size of someone's bedroom. That's why 3 3/4 inch works so well for that. If you think about Star Wars, Kenner Star Wars started 3 3/4 inches tall, and they've been, I think 3 3/4 inch has been a mainstay in Star Wars since the beginning. I'll bring in some right now. These are, in my opinion, some of the best Star Wars figures ever made. A little bit of everything. You've got movie figures. These are all prequel figures, if you really boil it down. The Bo-Katan is from Mandalorian. She's a vintage collection figure. And, I think Vintage Collection is the best Star Wars line out there. I think the figures look really good. Everything about it is solid. I have a clone trooper, a clone lieutenant from Ahsoka that was from the Vintage Collection. That's one of my favorite clone troopers ever. He looks really good. This Bo-Katan figure looks really good. The Mandalorian from the series looks really good. A lot of these figures from the vintage collection are just good figures. As well, you've got the animated series figures. You've got more movie figures with this clone trooper, and I forgot his name. Obviously, that's General Grievous. Here's the clone lieutenant from Ahsoka. Oops, I knocked that guy over, but there you can see. I don't know how well that scaling is. I don't know if Bo-Katan is actually supposed to be that short. It kind of makes sense that a dude in the armor would be really tall, but yeah, that's just like some of my favorite figures from my favorite scale for Star Wars. I do have some Black Series figures. I do, passively collect Star Wars Black Series. I'll buy the occasional figure that really piques my interest, but for the most part, it's just not really my jam. I don't have a lot of 6-inch Star Wars, mostly just because, Marvel Legends are $25 and Star Wars Black Series are, kind of inconsistent with the pricing. And if I'm going to get a Star Wars figure, it's going to be vintage or it's going to be one of the following lines that you see on the screen now. Well, this guy too, but he fell over. I don't actually know this guy's name. I've had him for probably going on 8 years now, and I don't actually know his name. It's not Commander Fox. I, for a very long time, thought it was. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. Anyone watching this out there. But, yeah. I like him a lot. He's really cool. And that's the Star Wars segment, the 3 3/4-inch Star Wars figures. Now, where do I think 3 3/4-inch doesn't work for action figures? And in that department, I would say, really, any Marvel figures. I don't think Marvel is a line that needs to be 3 3/4 inches tall. But I also don't think there's ever really been a 3 3/4-inch Marvel line that was done right. I have this Iron Fist here from Marvel Universe. Anyone who knows their history, Marvel Universe kind of replaced Marvel Legends, if I'm accurate on that. If I'm not, again, correct me in the comments, but I don't believe I'm wrong. Because I know I've seen 3 3/4-inch Marvel figures that were branded Marvel Legends, and I did some research on YouTube. Nothing extensive by any means, just simple, researching and watching, a couple minutes of a video, and, 6-inch Marvel Legends weren't performing well, so I think somewhere around, 2013, let me see when this figure is dated, I believe the copyright on his leg says 2013, but it's really hard to tell because the plastic is white. But this figure, I just think is an overall downgrade of Marvel Legends. And it's not just this guy, there's others as well. The way they're built, nothing against Hasbro, right? They definitely could have done better, I think, in 2013. I think things could have happened better. Things could have been executed properly, instead of just trying to do what Toy Biz did. They've said that before, that they were just trying to do what Toy Biz was doing and it wasn't working. They needed to do their own thing. And I think this figure is a 3 3/4-inch version of what really broke them through and away from just trying to be Toy Biz. Because the head sculpt on this figure is not the best, and the articulation setup is not the best. But if you really look at this guy, he has a very similar articulation setup to a lot of Marvel Legends. He's got double jointed knees. I didn't really go over the articulation on the Star Wars guys, mainly because they all move really well. The only thing is the clone troopers, their legs don't have the best range of motion, and General Grievous and the Jedi, their articulation is kind of all over the place. It's really inconsistent with the figures. So there's no set articulation scheme, everything is kind of, it all works differently. Depends on the figure. But back to this guy. His head's on a ball joint. It barely moves up and down. It moves side to side, all right. His arms move out, and they go up. They move down, forward, backward. Swivel at the bicep, hinge at the elbow, gets a little bit past 90, not quite 45. Swivel at the wrist. The torso crunches forward and backward. You can see a little bit of that trench right there, but that's okay. No swivel, but there is a rotation at the ball joint, so it's like a hinge, and then there's like a peg that this rotates on. The leg moves forward, and this is where the problem is you can see the leg falls off. This figure has ball jointed hips, and it's pretty much beyond saving. There's nothing that can really be done about it. The hips on these figures, I have 3 of these Marvel Universe figures, Marvel Legends figures, and they're all the same. The ball joint at the hip always kills it, because the leg just won't stay on. So I can move this forward and backward. Look at that. That I wasn't even trying to do it. I pop it back on. It can't go on any further, right? Move it forward, and I move it back, and it falls off. So this figure isn't really playable. You can't really handle this thing without supporting that hinge. And for someone like me, who I think someone like me is a lot like a lot of other people, that's really annoying, man. I don't want to have to put pressure on the hip hinge when I'm moving the figure. And I think a 3¾ inch Marvel line can be done right. I just don't think that this is it. So unfortunately, he's out of here. No, I actually don't dislike this figure. Oh, okay. This is a good figure for someone who just, wants to pose it and leave it. The only problem is you can't really move the legs. I didn't finish the articulation segment. I probably should. Legs don't really move out. That's as far out as they go. Double jointed knee. The knee gets good range. I just think, because you can't move the leg, what's the point? And there's no rocker at the ankle, which is kind of a pain, but it does move up, down, and swivel. It's got a lot of the same articulation as a Marvel Legend. It's just the way it's cut. I might do a video modding this guy, because I could get his leg to move out, if I really, really tried at it, but I'm not going to, right now in this video at least. I might make a video, but this isn't it. But that's it for him. Overall, 3¾ inch for Marvel Legends is not, or for Marvel figures is not it. What is good for Marvel figures is, I'm sure everybody knows this, 6-inch scale. 6-inch scale for Marvel Legends, or for Marvel figures, is just the best scale. This is the X-Men 97 Wolverine. Of course, you probably know him. I'm trying to get him to stand right now. He might not. There we go. 6-inch just looks best for Marvel Legends, or for Marvel figures. Marvel Legends in particular. You've got Marvel Legends, SH Figuarts, Mafex, Amazing Yamaguchi, what else? Mezco, Figma, when they randomly decide to drop Marvel figures. Theirs are usually pretty good. You've got others out there, but 6-inch for Marvel figures is really the best, I think. Marvel isn't a line that is really built off of vehicles and stuff. I mean, you could maybe make the claim with X-Men, you would want, Sentinels, which HasLab did make a Sentinel, but it's on the aftermarket now for probably $1,000, I don't know. But I think it was $400, maybe $500 when it came out. The Toy Biz Sentinel is probably the best one. I think 6-inch, there's no real reason why 6-inch isn't the best for Marvel. It allows for a lot of detail. Marvel figures, you know, can and I think should be really detailed. Like 3/4 inch for Star Wars is the best because of the vehicles. If there were no vehicles, I would say 6-inch because, you know, um the detailing is easiest to capture on a figure of that scale. But you don't need vehicles for Marvel figures, really. Um, so 6-inch just works best. Also, because 6-inch is the hype right now, it's like the universal scale of everything. Um, I think that 6-inch is the best. Now there have been Marvel figures of other scales too. 5-inch, of course, with Toy Biz's, their Marvel figures. Here's Corsair. I think these worked actually because it was coming right off the heels of the 1980s when everything was 3 3/4 inches tall. Everything got really small in the 80s. You had lines like Masters of the Universe that were 5 inches, and I think Masters of the Universe was like an original superhero line. And to me, it kind of makes sense in my head that these are 5 inches because that was the scale of Motu. So, this allowed them to be able to put a play feature on a figure, not have it be too small. The play feature could be stowed inside the figure some way, built onto it to where it didn't have to be this massive contraption. It allowed them to be handleable for children. These are kids' toys, right? So it's made for like ages 3 and up, 4 and up, whatever. I think this scale worked best for these figures. It just did. And that's where the exception is, right? Because this is a vintage toy line. They did it first. They made the first, like, fully fleshed out Marvel line. They were going off of nothing. So 5 inches was probably the easiest to work with because it wasn't too big, it wasn't too small. They could put just enough detail in there so that you know that this is Corsair without being, needing to be told. But also it looks really good. This looks like a comic book Corsair figure. And I think there's a lot to say about that. Marvel Legends does the same thing, but they have way more advanced technology and their figures are a little bit better. When these things were out, like, toy making wasn't the same, right? This thing was probably hand painted. I don't know that for sure, but that would be my guess. And yeah, I just think that these in the 5-inch scale, I don't know what the actual like ratio for that is. Like, I don't know if there would be 1/18. No, 1/18 is 3 3/4 inch. I don't know what the like number is for this scale. But 5 inches was right for these guys. On to something that I think is wrong. A couple scales that I think are wrong is 7 inches. I think 7 inches is a terrible scale. I don't like anything really that's 7 inches tall. McFarlane is fine being 7 inches. I know that's kind of an excuse. It's not kind of an excuse, it's a big excuse. But that's because, like, I'm personally not really going to display Spawn with any of my other stuff. But also, I think McFarlane has kind of always had scaling issues. I'll put Batgirl up here so you can see the the size there. She is 7 inches tall. Here she is next to a Star Wars Black Series Shore Trooper. So she is like really tall next to him. Which is fine. That's okay because I don't display my DC figures with my Black Series figures or my Marvel figures. I was really doing that so you could gauge Marvel Legends size. I don't really have any interest in displaying DC with Marvel Legends. It's not something I'm going to do. So, yeah, I mean, I think 7 inches if it was Marvel would be bad. But 7 inches, because McFarlane has, like, pretty much consistently had weird scaling, his figures were 5 inches, and then they were 7 inches, and I think they've been 7 inches since, like, the 2000s. And with Spawn in particular, I don't really mind, because Spawn is its own thing, and, you know, Spawn as a character, I just imagine being taller, so he can be as tall as he wants to be, as long as he's not like a foot tall. That would be too much. I think 7 inches is right for Spawn. You know, in most of those characters, because just the way they're built, being so muscular, the way Todd McFarlane's art style is, it fits the character to be taller. And I agree with that. For Halo, I think is the next thing I'm going to talk about. Here is my custom battle damaged Master Chief. I don't know if I've featured this guy on the channel before. If I haven't, here he is, very blurry and now in focus. I might do a video on him, not really sure, but that's not what we're here for. Again, I think 3 3/4 inches is a really good scale for Halo. I'm gonna be honest, I think it is. The vehicles, Halo is a lot like Star Wars. If you think about it in like the concept of toys, Halo is about the vehicles. It's about the figures, yeah, but it's about the vehicles, because, you know, you can only make so many grunts and jackals and brutes before people say, where's my warthog? Where's my, you know, my banshee? My stupid little turret that the grunts shoot at me with. Like, where are those things, man? And if you don't make that, you know, you can't make that with 6-inch scale, right? Imagine a warthog, 6 inches, it would be like the size of a desk. You can't really do that. So, having these being 3 3/4 makes it marketable, it makes it affordable, most importantly. But I do think 6 inches does work for Halo, because Master Chief is my favorite video game character, and for me, having a 6-inch Master Chief is really nice, because I can put him with any of my figures. He's huge. I love this figure. This is one of my favorite figures that I own. Actually, this guy is super, super cool. I know there's a lot of hate around Halo Infinite. I know this is probably a hot take. I had a lot of hot takes in my Halo video. I think Halo Infinite is my second favorite design for Master Chief, if not my favorite. Halo 3 I might like just a little bit more, but I think I like Halo Infinite's at least as much as Halo 3, if not more. He just looks so good, man. This is what I know as Master Chief. I see this guy, and I recognize other versions of Master Chief as well, but something about this version just looks so good. I love how it looks. It looks very classic to me. It looks a lot like Halo 3's Master Chief, in my opinion. Just like the shaping of the helmet. I think the shoulder pads look kind of similar. Just the way the armor is cut and designed is very similar. But it's just a little bit more, like, straight and maybe tactical looking. And I think this figure is really, really good. I think 6-inch Halo needed to exist because, you know, there needed to be that higher end, more detailed scale for these things. You know, because little guy over here doesn't have interchangeable hands. The guns, there's kind of some problems with the guns. These are more like toys. But I like these a lot. The World of Halo, that's what these are. These are World of Halo. This is Spartan Collection. So the 3 3/4 is World of Halo, but they just look really good, both of them. I mean, this guy looks better because I customized him. It's not really a fair comparison. So, you know, I don't have one on me right now to actually show off, but yeah, the World of Halo figures and the Spartan Collection figures both look great, and I think both are very good scales for Halo. I think 5-inch as well is a good scaling. 5-inch Halo figures are really good. I like them a lot. I just wish that they weren't as easy to break, but that's okay. You know, that's a design flaw, but I can work with it because I'm a customizer. And the last scale that I want to go over is 12 inch. And I'm going to have to move to a new setup because this isn't big enough. Of course, we have to talk about 12-inch scale. And I don't know about anybody watching this video, but the first toy line that immediately comes to mind when I think of the 1/6 scale is G.I. Joe. Specifically vintage G.I. Joe. This is a figure from the Adventure Team. This is like basically the mascot of the toy line. This is the Land Adventurer. I know there's probably not a lot of people that will ever watch this that know who this is. Or know what this is, rather. G.I. Joe was the very first action figure. It was the toy line that created the term action figure. They needed to market a doll for boys, basically, to break the barrier, the stigma that boys can't play with action figures. And they needed to figure out a way to market this thing so that parents wouldn't look at it as, you know, their son buying a Barbie. So they made the term action figure. They designed it off of a model of those like artisans models that they use for drawing, like what I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And they created this guy. This is probably to this day, not probably, definitely to this day, my favorite action figure ever. This isn't my favorite action figure in my collection, but this is my favorite toy line. It's revolutionary. It marks a turning point in really toy history in its entirety. I don't think anything would be where it is right now if it wasn't for this guy. So maybe you don't like him, but at least respect him, please. But, some, like, 20... Well, let me think here. Probably, like, 25 years after he was canceled came the G.I. Joe Classic Collection in the 90s and 2000s. I think this figure came out in 1996. So from 1964 is when G.I. Joe started to 1976. This figure came out 20 years, right? Yeah, 20 years after this line was canceled. It was rebooted to the G.I. Joe Classic Collection. And now, why do I think that 12 inches is the ideal scale for G.I. Joe? Well, what built G.I. Joe as being G.I. Joe is it was originally a military toy line. I don't have any of the military figures on me. I'm not talking about this guy, actually. I'm specifically talking about these G.I. Joe figures. This is the vintage figure. The vintage G.I. Joe, not Real American Hero. It's still cool, but it's not completely vintage. This is the original. These were originally came out in 1964 as a military toy line. They represented all four branches of the military. And part of why they needed to make it so big is because they needed to have each figure as a dressable figurine. I'm not going to undress him because mainly I don't want to damage the uniform, but also that's kind of weird to strip this guy on camera. I'm sure he wouldn't like that. So, to get the accessories, the pistol comes out of the holster. You've got the revolver right there, very hard to find. The dog tag is removable, shirt, pants, boots, everything is removable. You can completely customize this figure. You can even take it apart if you know what you're doing. You can cut the elastic on the inside, and you can give him, like, different legs. They didn't make any other legs, unless if you wanted to give him, like, the lower half of, like, the African-American figure, which, if you want to, you can, but it's the same mold, and I don't really know why you would do that. So, that's like really why these needed to be 12 inches tall. If it was anything other than 12 inches, it wouldn't have worked. And, you can see here, this guy, the Navy crewman, came out in the Classic Collection. He came with a big twin cannon. This guy here I'm about to put in, this guy right here, was my brother's first G.I. Joe. So this figure belonged to my aunt. This one is, I got this guy brand new. And this one is my brother's. So, you know, you can kind of see the evolution there of G.I. Joe. And, yeah, I think if G.I. Joe was like 3 3/4 inch, which it did become 3 3/4 inch, but I'm not talking about that in this video. If G.I. Joe was originally made as 3 3/4 inch and they tried to do this stuff, it of course wouldn't have worked. That's almost impossible. I'm sure it's probably doable now with materials, but it would be really, really difficult, and I think the figure would just look kind of puffy. Wouldn't look right. This was really the only way to do it. And I think because of that, it's just the ideal scaling for these figures. They all look really good. I mean, they resemble the real world perfectly. You know, you've got the Air Force like crew chief, the gunner for the Navy guy, the land adventurer from the good old days, and this is just like a fatigues soldier. You know, so yeah, that's pretty much gonna wrap up this video. I'm gonna end it here. To summarize the entire video, there's no real good scale that I think is better than the other. There are bad scales for certain lines, like Star Wars shouldn't be 12 inches tall because you can't make an X-Wing. Marvel Legends or Marvel figures doesn't really matter, although I think they perform best at 6 inches. That's what they've been since the early 2000s. That's what they should stay as, in my opinion. G.I. Joe should always be 12 inches tall. I think the new 6-inch G.I. Joe line is solid. Classified series is doing really well right now. They've got a lot of good releases. But yeah, I think for G.I. Joe, the ideal scale will always be 12 inches, and that will never change. And same with Star Wars and Marvel and pretty much everything else. Halo, I think, will always be split. It will always be just as good in 6-inch scale as it is in 3 3/4 inch because, you know, you need the vehicles for 3 3/4, but there are some really, really detailed suits that is just really nice to get a super detailed figure with all that sculpting and nice detailing. The paint apps might not be the best, but, you know, I don't really care. I'm a customizer. I can add that myself, right? So, yeah, that's about it for this video. I'll see you later.